In the spring of 1944, a quiet mill town in South Carolina became the stage for one of the most shocking trials in American history. At its center was a child, just 14 years old, accused of a crime so brutal that fear and outrage silenced questions of fairness. His name was George Stinney Jr., and within weeks of his arrest, he would become the youngest person sentenced to death in the United States during the 20th century. Alcolu, South Carolina, was deeply segregated. Black families lived on one side of the tracks, white families on the other. Tension was always close to the surface. On March 23, 1944, two young white girls, Betty June Binnicker, 11, and Mary Emma Thames, 7, went missing while out riding their bicycles. The next morning, their bodies were found in a ditch, both killed by blunt force trauma. The community's grief quickly turned to anger, and suspicion fell on George Stinney. He was a black teenager, small for his age, barely 90 pounds, who had reportedly been seen speaking with the girls earlier that day. That brief encounter was enough. Police arrived, took George into custody, and questioned him for hours. No lawyer, no parents in the room, just a frightened child in uniformed hands. Officers later claimed George confessed. But no written statement, no signed document, no recording was ever produced. There was no physical evidence linking him to the crime. Still, authorities announced they had their culprit. His trial came less than a month later. April 24, 1944. The courtroom was filled with white townspeople. George's family had fled, fearing violence. The jury was made up entirely of white men. The trial lasted just one day. Witnesses were scarce. The defense attorney called no witnesses, presented no evidence, and barely cross-examined. When the jury left to deliberate, they returned in less than 10 minutes. The verdict, guilty. The sentence, death by electrocution. On June 16, 1944, George was led into the execution chamber. The electric chair was designed for grown men, so prison staff had to build a booster seat to fit his small frame. His Bible was placed beneath him so the straps could reach. Witnesses later said the helmet was too large and slipped over his face. 3 shocks ended his life. George was only 14 years old. For decades, the case lay buried, but questions lingered. Could a boy so small have committed such a crime alone? Why was there no evidence, no weapon, no blood? And why did the state move so quickly? Many suspected the truth. George had been railroaded by fear, prejudice, and a desperate demand for closure. Nearly 70 years later, the case was reopened. In 2014, new hearings examined what had been ignored in 1944. Experts testified that George's so-called confession was unreliable. His trial violated constitutional rights, and forensic evidence suggested it was physically improbable he committed the crime. Even more powerful were the accounts from his family, who remembered George insisting on his innocence to the very end. On December 17, 2014, a South Carolina judge vacated his conviction, calling the trial a fundamental injustice. For his surviving relatives, it was a bittersweet victory. George's sister said through tears, "We can sleep better now." But the irony remains. The state had claimed George's execution would bring peace. Instead, it left a wound that lasted generations. George Stinney Jr. became not just the youngest person executed in modern American history, but also a symbol of how race, fear, and haste can shatter justice. And one question lingers still. If it took 70 years to clear George's name, how many more stories remain untold? Lives lost to silence, injustice, and time?